All right. I think we're live and recording. Yes, we are. Okay.
All right.
All right. Hello, anyone who came a bit early. Nice to finally show my face on the internet. What could go wrong?
I
What
don't
could go
think I see
wrong?
it over here. I'm not seeing on Zoom for some reason.
I think it should be working. I see. Oh, I see us. I think we're good. All right. And someone is there. Confused heathen. Just say hello.
Oh, that's one of my close friends from the ex-Muslim community.
Oh, amazing. Okay. So, yeah, let's do quick introductions just to get going. So, I'm Alim, a secular spirit.
Nice to meet
Um,
you.
nice to meet you, Aladdin. Oh, well, what's your tagline? I really liked it. Let me show you the world from the
From the eyes
perspective.
of an
Yeah,
ex-Muslim.
from the eyes. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. We were
For
talking
sure.
about this a little bit before we started going live, that I just thought you'd be a perfect person to just do this with. I really like your posts on TikTok, on Twitter as well. I like your, you know, calm, rational perspective on things. You haven't been
Well, I
doing the
try.
social media for long, right?
No, I have not. By the way, I just want to let you know your camera's still not working on Zoom, but uh, I'll let that slide, I
Oh,
suppose.
we're good on YouTube though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, I have not been doing this for long, and I never really intended on being a social media person. So, excuse me while I figure my way around this realm, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the moment I realized where we might be kindred spirits actually was, I think it was right after the day after the Super Bowl, and that the meme of the weekend, the musician just wandering around in that room of mirrors or whatever it
Right.
was, and I posted some joke about it that that's like what Muslims look like when they're trying to find good evidence for Allah, and I think you posted right after that. Damn, I was just gonna do that, and I knew. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
kindred
I get a
spirits.
little jealous when someone thinks of my meme idea and they steal it, but I mean, not steal it, but you get what I mean.
I know. Yeah. Got there first. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could start us off by, I guess, just telling me what your life as a Muslim was like. I assume you were born Muslim.
Yes. Yes, I was.
So yeah,
Um,
yeah. Just tell me, what kind of believer were you? What would you classify yourself as? Very traditional, maybe more casual, relaxed.
no, I was a pious believer, or if that's what you want to call it. Um, I grew up in the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia. That's where I spent most of my time there.
Hmm.
Um, and I grew up in a family where religion was taken seriously. It wasn't one of those families of, as people would call it, extremism, where no music was
Hmm.
allowed, no movies, that kind of thing. But at the same time, it wasn't a cultural Islam type of family. Um, so everything was observed the way that they believed Allah intended. Um, I was pretty enthusiastic about religion. Like I grew up um, with a lot of interest in this stuff because I was generally curious about a lot of things, and especially as a child, what is not to like about stories of like mythical tales and heroes and entertaining stories like that. Like that is one angle that I looked at it from as a child. Um, so then, growing up, I was taught Quran. My parents thought it was important to teach me religion, so I was taught Quran by a teacher who would come over, once or twice a week to help me memorize and read Quran the way, like the way that sheikhs would with tilawa. Sorry, with
Yeah.
tajweed. Um, and we used to go over like some of these meanings that he would explain to me the verses that we're reading, because obviously, though I understand Arabic, a lot of this stuff doesn't mean anything without any context. It's just kind of like strung together different parts of different stories, and he would give me a bit of background about that. um, I grew up like liking this stuff. I was always enthusiastic about when we went for Umrah. I've been, like, this is not a flex, but I've been for Umrah more times than I can count even. Um, and I just always wanted to ask more. So that's just a little bit about my background, like growing up with Islam.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Mhm.
For me, I was born Muslim as well. I come from a Palestinian family. I grew up for the most part in the UAE, which I would say, if you had to categorize it, is kind of in the middle in terms of how religious the country is. It's not as serious as Saudi Arabia or any of those other very Islamic countries, but it has hints of it. But it also tries to be a bit more liberal to encourage the tourists to come along and not be terrified. Uh,
Yeah.
and so that's pretty much what my Islamic upbringing was. Uh, I went to school in the UAE, and we'd have a special class where we'd be taught religion, Islamic education. They taught us all the standard things, tajweed and tilawah, as you mentioned, and we'd have to memorize the Quran and the Hadith, and that's really where I was taught Islam. So at home, my parents were very casual believers, or so I thought, but I'm going to get into that in a second. And so they didn't really teach me anything. Like a story that I mentioned just in my Leaving Islam account was the day came when we had to pray in school or something. Like it was just like a special occasion. We usually there was a mosque in the school. We usually didn't pray there unless you wanted to, but this was a mandatory thing. And I think I was 7 or 8, and I realized I have no idea how to pray, and following the proper steps and rules and all that. And I went to my parents and I asked them, "Can you teach me how do you do it?" And they just didn't know. They had no idea either, and so I remember being stunned by that and thinking, "Oh my God, my parents are sinners." And uh, I eventually managed to figure it out from just using. I have a younger brother. I just took one of his books that actually had step-by-step instructions, and I taught myself overnight. And I just wanted to learn enough where I could just pass and not, be exposed and embarrassed as not even knowing how to pray when you're 7 or 8. So prayer wasn't really a big thing for us. Going to the mosque, never really. So we really were on the very casual end of being Muslims. And I later found out, after I left Islam, this is kind of skipping ahead, but my parents were actually not Muslim. They were just pretending.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a
So
plot twist I did not see
I
coming.
know, right? So there's quite a few pretty religious people in my extended family, but my parents, for their own reasons, which some of which were similar to mine, which I'll get into later as well, they just stopped believing. But they didn't want to sway me or my brother into that direction. They wanted us to just learn Islam because they thought it was important that I learn it as part of my heritage and culture, to learn it and then to make the decision for myself. And what ended up happening was I progressively became more religious the older I got, 13, 14, and where I did start praying on my own. And I would go to the mosque, and I secretly harbored these beliefs that my parents were just these big sinners, and I'd I guess reprimand them for it. and yeah, so I retained this religion on my own, and then I guess you could say I became like an intermediate believer. And yeah, so the next thing I wanted to ask you was, what was your perception of leaving Islam at that point when you were still, a believer? Like, did you know of ex-Muslims? Was that a word that was even known to you?
Well, that's a very good question. Sometimes it takes me a while to try to remember what it was like at that time, because that concept was so foreign to me that someone would leave Islam. The word ex-Muslim didn't even come like on my radar till very, very recently. Um, I presume that nobody really leaves Islam except the bad people, because the few examples that I've remotely heard of, like none of them were really friends or anything, but it would be family, friends, or relatives, and I would be told this story about how, this person he left the country for work, and then, he found a white girl, and then he settled with her,
Oh,
and then
okay.
that whole story. I was told that they were chasing, as they put the chasing their desires, just going there to have their fun, and then they decided I want to keep having this fun during my life. So that was my perception of people who leave religion, or that they were, unaware of what Islam actually is, and they were just falling for all this propaganda about Islam. So it wasn't really a viable option in my head that someone would know Islam and leave Islam if they're a good person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, no, it totally makes sense. For me, ex-Muslim wasn't in my vocabulary. I didn't know any ex-Muslims. It's hard to explain now, but back then it didn't even occur to me that people in the modern day who are Muslim would leave.
Hmm.
It just didn't occur to me. I knew that uh, the punishment for apostasy was death. I mean, it was in what we were being taught in the Quran, and there were stories of people leaving Islam and faking being Muslim, during the time of Muhammad. Um, but I didn't make the connection that that could be something that happened today. It was really a feeling of I'm part of this special club, I guess, by the grace of God, and this is it. This is life. This is what life is. So it was never even a concept that there was a life outside of it.
Well, I felt similarly, but I didn't even know to the extent of um, like that the apostasy laws weren't really on my radar, to so to speak. Because in the Quran itself, it doesn't explicitly say if you leave Islam, you should be killed.
No, no.
There's a lot of implications in there, like, disbelievers are the worst of the worst. And some Muslims who try to rationalize it by saying, oh, this only applies to that one war or this one group of
To a
disbelievers
specific
that God meant.
context. Yeah, yeah. I've
Yeah.
heard that too. Yeah.
I want to talk about that whole like context issue later.
Sure.
But the point is, like, I heard about apostasy laws. I knew Saudi Arabia was extreme with things, or so like I believe. So it wasn't really looking at Saudi Arabia's implementation or Wahhabism or Sharia law in any form that made me feel like that there was something wrong. So I was just aware that, those who spread corruption about Islam, like those who are out to make up lies about Islam and make it look bad, I didn't think too hard about what should happen to them. But like when I heard that, oh, they're jailed or punished, I'm like, well, seems about right. Like that's what you get for kind of like rioting or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how I felt about it at the time. I wasn't aware, again, like that someone could leave Islam. Like
Yeah.
that was not an option in my head.
It's almost like this thing where, if I had to just think of another way of putting it, is when you're not Muslim or you're going against Islam, it's almost like you're going against uh, just the nature of
Justice.
existence, the just goodness.
Okay. Yeah.
So you must be evil. You must be twisted in some way. You must be a psychopath to just go against your own nature. That's really how it felt, the world outside of Islam, because that's reality. Why would you be against reality?
Yeah, it's just it made sense to you, and Islam capitalizes on this by calling it fitra. That
Yeah, yeah,
innate nature
innate, yeah,
inside you. Yeah, they would attribute, like, I mean, Islam, Muslims, whatever. But when I say Islam, I mean this is actually in Islam, not just a bad interpretation or something. But it's this idea that fitra is anything good, basically. The
hmm
fact that you don't feel like harming another person, that's fitra. That
yeah,
also you can extend that to mean that you know God and you love God. But those are two very different things. But it always felt like the default was Islam, right?
yeah,
Like I wasn't even aware, like when when I was really young and I watched the movie and I saw like a man and a woman hugging, and I was like, that's, Mom, isn't that haram? And she said, well, there are people who aren't Muslim. And I was like, why? You know,
hmm
in my head, it did not make sense that they're not Muslim. Um, so yeah, that's why it's very easy to justify anything. Like once you're really convinced that that person is going against the greater good, um, it's not hard to see them in a very bad light by default.
For
Does that
sure.
make sense?
Yeah. I remember also that what we were taught about the Jewish faith and people who are Christians as well was they're on the right track, but they're kind of behind us. They're just missing the
Yeah.
point, and but they're okay. That was kind of the and everyone else, they're just lost or being
That's
seduced by the
actually
devil.
that's one of the things that kind of started to give me a lot of doubts was this idea, this question, well, what happens to good Christian people, right? Or good disbelievers? And I was always like, no matter how the question is phrased, I'm always told that Jews and Christians, only God knows what's going to happen. Like God might take it by intention, their intention and niyyah is always there. So they meant to worship God, but it just, you know, they had the right idea there. So they may go to heaven. And I'm like, okay, what about the rest? Like, what about a Hindu or a disbeliever? And they say, well, if you worship a cow, what do you expect? Like, that's how they put it.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, like obviously you're way deluded, so you deserve whatever you get. And that really bothered me because I could see how our default is their default is our weird, and our default is their absurd. So that really made me rethink the whole like justice afterlife thing. That's when it started giving me doubts about that particular topic.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, with Christians and other people like that, my parents' attitude was, again, they're kind of lying as they're telling me this, but that's God is the ultimate good, and if you are a good person, whether you're a Muslim or not, God will see in your inner core that you're good, and of course you're going to go to heaven. So that's kind of how they rationalized it, if that makes sense to me. And I've heard that rationalization from other Muslims in my family and on social media and elsewhere. I was wondering if you ever heard that as well.
I have, but more like I only see this on the more cultural Muslim, liberal Muslim side.
Yeah, it's the reformed Muslim view, I would say.
I wouldn't even call it reformed, to be honest, because there's no solid basis for this kind of reform yet, though there's a lot of attempts. Yeah, I mean, that's just the way I would phrase it. I feel like they're trying for reform, or they're just trying to dilute it to what makes sense to them. But I've always heard that, that's just the final answer to get away of the question about hell and heaven. But Islam is pretty explicitly clear about what happens to disbelievers and polytheists.
Oh yeah, repetition is definitely the Quran's method of hammering in those lessons. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned one of your doubts. That's kind of what I wanted to ask you as well, was why did this doubt start happening? Like, I'm sure it wasn't just one thing. So was it, but maybe it was a specific thing that started, the chain reaction.
So I'm going to throw a few out there. But
all right, let's hear it.
In no order of importance, or I might be forgetting something very significant as well. So don't take this to be like my whole answer for that.
Okay.
But because again, it's not like, for a lot of people, it's not a single event or single thing that made us realize, okay, that sounds suspicious. But anyway, without the preamble, the next, my next thought here was, one of the things was predestination. Qada and qadr. How does predestination work with free will? And I know, like, I've gotten people, I've gotten like two types of responses to that. I've gotten sheikhs telling me, okay, that's impressive that you thought of that young. But then I had other sheikhs say,
sorry to interrupt you, how old were you around when these kinds of ideas started coming?
Well, that kind of questioning about predestination or not being able to, make it work in my head, that was around the age of, I'd say, 15.
Okay.
Before, like, I don't think I was that young to be thinking that way, but the sheikhs either tell me that or they tell me you must have heard it somewhere, because that's one of the, I don't know, the bigger, more complex issues in Islam, that you probably heard it from someone trying to give you doubts about Islam. That attitude is really infuriating, because they make it seem like there's a conspiracy to disbelief, and that nothing you believe yourself is like your own thoughts.
Or legitimate,
Yeah. But anyway, I asked those questions around that age, and the answers I was given were very vague and along the lines of, this is a very complex topic, or either maybe another simple answer, which is God can make a paradox work, like it is God, right? that was a big one, but there was also what I just spoke about good people going to hell. If it was merely about people being good, then that would have made sense. But like I said, the Quran is pretty clear about, or even like the Quran seems pretty clear about what happens to disbelievers and polytheists. Um, anyway, that didn't make sense to me that God would be so upset about how their situation, their mentality, the way that He created them, left them at that position, and He would punish them for it. But one other thing that seems kind of insignificant, but when I was younger, around like maybe the age of like somewhere like 10 or younger, uh, my mother would read me seerah, or also like stories of the prophets, qasas al-anbiya, before bedtime. And I really enjoyed them. I enjoyed this fantastical, it's like, you know, bedtime fairy tales, but they were real. So that made it even more interesting. But I remember at some point I was asking, okay, how come we don't see miracles anymore? How come like all these miracles stopped? And my mother said, well, they all ended with the prophet. And, you know, when you think about it now,
You don't need them anymore, yeah.
Yeah, how mighty convenient, you know? So, yeah, that was one of the things that now led me to doubt, is that, you know, all the superstitious stuff that we see in every culture has suddenly stopped, you know, once we have ways to collect evidence and find none. So, yeah, that was one of the reasons.
Oh wow. I gotta say that for me the doubts, I was a bit older. So basically I moved to Canada for university when I was 17, and around that time I had this whole existential crisis, depression, whatever you want to call it, where I was thinking, what's the point of doing anything? Why am I going to school? Why am I moving, you know, across the world to go to school for a degree that I'm not really interested in? It was marketing, by the way. I was never interested in marketing, but just did it because you need to pick something to do, even if you're not interested in anything. And part of that was I kind of realized that, you know, Islam is supposed to give you those answers that you're looking for in terms of what your life meaning and the purpose of what you're doing, and in the greater scheme of things. And that's what I did believe when I was younger, but somehow it just didn't work for me when I was going through this crisis. And that question of why isn't it working? I mean, it should be comforting to know that there's a plan for me, that if I'm a good person, I'll go to the paradise, and that everything that bad that happens in the world that I see, whether, you know, what's happening to Palestinians at the hands of the Israelis, or whatever it is, there's reasons for it, and it just didn't work. And so I started exploring why it didn't work for me, and I came across many of those issues that you just mentioned. I think the predestination one really bugged me because I couldn't escape this whole idea in my head that this, even if God gave us a purpose in this life, what was His purpose in doing it in the first place? It seemed to be this kind of omitted thing where, as you mentioned earlier, where they just say, you know, trust in Allah, He knows, He knows what's best for us. It's whatever it is, it's for the best of us. And sometimes I'd hear because He wanted someone to worship Him. He wanted people to worship Him. And it still didn't answer me, why does He need this? I mean, if it's Allah, He doesn't need anything. So why is He doing this? And I just couldn't escape this idea that maybe, what if Allah is just this bored entity that has just made all of this and made us suffer like these little guinea pigs in this whole game, and He makes us who we are, which I was taught was the case. Our fates are sealed, and yet we have free choice to worship Him or not. And that paradox just didn't make sense to me. It just didn't, and that's kind of what started the whole ball rolling for me.
I mean, in my case, everything that I've mentioned wasn't even like the tipping point at all. Those are just the first little sprouts of doubts. And I just was able to push it aside with all the answers that you mentioned, and it kind of worked for a little bit, but it was a distraction. Like when we say Allah knows best, you shouldn't even try to understand how He works, because you can't. Again, on the surface level, that makes sense. A creator, you know, who's infinitely powerful, Of course, he would understand things better than you can. So why would you not delegate the thinking part to him? But when you start looking at it from an outsider point of view, that okay, theoretically that's mighty convenient again, because if you get me to stop thinking about it, then I won't question it. But like just that's all we're still talking in theoreticals. If that creator existed and proved itself, then okay, I would see a point in not questioning it, right? Knowing that if it said there's a purpose to everything and it is truthful and it doesn't lie, all right, by default that makes sense. But we're still discussing a theoretical. So yeah, that's all of this stuff came back to haunt me later. But for a long time, these answers that you didn't find convincing did work on me to some extent, as they do with a lot of people. Yeah.
The interesting thing I found was that I think, in retrospect, one of the reasons why I started having all these questions and this crisis in questioning Islam was because I moved. I'm pretty sure if I had stayed, I mean, you never know. If I'd stayed in the UAE, I probably would still be Muslim today. I don't know, but I think what it was, just moving, it kind of gave me this opportunity to just take a look at my life and what was important in it from a new perspective. And when I was living in the UAE and when I was Muslim, it didn't even occur to me to ask these questions. It's just I didn't have the frame of reference to know to ask them, or to know that to just ask the question. And this is the one that really got me on the road to leaving, was why do I believe this? Because yeah, like, I think you're a bit younger than me, but I kind of had this realization that I'm going to university because my parents say that's what society says is best for you, not just your parents. I'm trying to get a business degree because you need to make money, and money is important because that's what society tells you. You need a job, and you need the job so you can afford to have a family. And I saw religion as kind of wrapped into this, where I saw that I believed because I was born to Muslim parents, and I grew up in a Muslim society, so I was taught Islam. And I started thinking, like, why do I actually believe this? Like, what is the reason? And it was really upsetting at first to realize that, oh, it's because people have told me that there's miracles in the Quran, and because life makes sense if you look at it that way. It really, I think if you talk to the average Muslim, they won't really say much more than that, unfortunately. And that was what was enough for me as well. Yeah. So those questions just wouldn't go away, and that's ultimately why I left. I think I was around 18 when I finally just decided that's it. How about you?
Well, it's funny. It's interesting that you mentioned like leaving was one of the accelerators that led you to doubt. I mean, in my case, I started having the doubts earlier, but I think the effect came from kind of the same source: exposure to the outside world. So, had I not been exposed to the fact that other people just exist that aren't Muslim, for example,
Yeah.
like if I was in an era or a place without access to internet, without access to TV, like just if I was born, I don't know, 30 years ago or something, it would have been even more of the default way of life to me. It would have made even less sense to not believe in this stuff. And either it would lead you to a point of madness because you're doubting and you're the only one who's doubting in your head, or it would lead you to like clinging on really hard because what other option do you see? So in my case, my doubts, like it was just realizing that it's okay to question these things because other good people have and do. But I wasn't aware of the extent of it. And it was only after I moved to a secular country, after a few years of living there and clinging on to my religion, that I realized again, exposure to people who I thought were arrogant or bad, like just to throw an example out there, like gay people, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't super homophobic, but I was like, the idea seemed icky to me. And I was thinking about it from the point of view of like, would I want to do this? No. So why would they? And then I was told that it's always because they're, this is their way that they want and they're arrogant about it and so on and so forth. Until I met some and I was like, okay, they're just normal people. Like I had no idea they were gay because It's just everything else about them is normal. They're not rebels. They're not like it's none of this stuff that I was taught. So exposure to these other people and these other ideas definitely helped me realize that it's okay to explore my doubts. But unfortunately, a lot of Muslims see that as like, the West
You've been
pulling you into
corrupted.
sin.
Yeah, yeah, you've been
Yeah,
corrupted.
exactly.
Oh yeah, we've both been corrupted. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry. With I just wanted to interject with just like my own point of view of LGBTQ people was repulsion. I'm ashamed to say, completely repulsed. I thought it was disgusting. I thought it was a sin. I'd make homophobic jokes, and that's one of the things I realized, afterwards. Like, wait, why is being gay bad? And I realized I didn't have an answer. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I had to say. And I know that me bringing up the topic of LGBT and LGBT rights always, unfortunately, with the Muslim communities, always gets the finger pointed at you. Like, okay, are you sympathizing with gay people? Are you gay? Is that why you left religion? Because
I've gone that
religion
too.
says, yeah,
Yeah.
even if you're just sympathetic with, people who aren't you, you get accused of like siding with them. So yeah, I don't know how how a Muslim would think that this is a solid line of logic. The fact that, for example, I believe in Allah and hell. I believe fully that if one acts gay, whatever that means, they were going there. Why would I trade, the few years left of my life for eternity? Like if I was a sane person, my love for, the same gender wouldn't overpower my faith. Unless you're saying, only insane people apostatize, then are they really, in control of their life? Are they going to be punished for that kind of action? So it just didn't make sense to me that God would create those people and then would have an issue with it. Like God, the creator of the universe, who spent billions of years making this universe, only now cares about what one specific species does with their genitals. It doesn't make sense to me. So it's not just about advocating for gay people. It's fundamentally an issue for me that does not make sense that the creator of the universe would care about. So yeah, that's my view on that topic.
So just in terms of when you decided to leave or when you realized, oh, I'm no longer Muslim, like how did it feel like in your head? Like what was it like to go kind of through that realization? Was it just an instantaneous realization, or was it, just after some time you realized, oh, I don't believe anymore?
It was definitely not instantaneous, and it was not painless. Like for years, I was sort of in denial of my doubts. The more in denial of my doubts I was, the more defensive I was about Islam. I wouldn't pick fights with anyone or anything, but I was always trying to defend Islam online, especially when whatever major negative PR event to Islam happened, like some kind of attack in one country or another. I was always on the defensive, saying that this is not what Islam is like. This is not what Muslims are like. And I still stand by some of that this is not particularly indicative of how all Muslims behave at all. Obviously, that no one's arguing that. But I was just really pushing hard this narrative that Islam is true, and I was trying to convince myself as well as other people. And eventually I just shelved it for a while. And it caused me so much confusion because I couldn't be happy living my life as a non-Muslim. And I wouldn't even consider it that in my head. I was just thinking in my head, you are so misled right now. But I was also like, but I can't believe. Till I eventually had to sit down. I got to a point in my life in my mid-20s that, my life was moving on in such a way that this confusion was not going to help me at all. And it was going to hurt me and other people long term. So I thought I better really figure this stuff out for myself. And I sat down and I really looked into my doubts, and I was doing it with the intention of saving my faith. I wanted to be proven wrong about my doubts. I wanted that comfort of knowing that, God's going to fix everything, and that everything's going to be okay. You know the purpose of life. You know why you're doing everything that you're doing. But the more I dug deep into Islam, the more I realized, like, these people are giving me like the answers to try to figure out, like, they're just trying to shut up the doubt. They're not trying to answer it, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like throwing a bunch of different things at me and being like, well, whatever explanation you think makes sense, take that. And religion is about flexibility. But it's like the final word of God should be clearer than that, is what I thought. Yeah, so that was what really started getting me out of Islam. And it was also not just like listening to a few sheikhs and deciding because these sheikhs misunderstand Islam that Islam is bad or anything. But thankfully, we have closer access to like the Islam because it's Arabic, and we understand Arabic. So I'm assuming you understand Arabic.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Am I being presumptuous? Okay. So it's easier for us to like look up what, forget all the apologetics, forget all the new reinterpretations that are coming up.
Yeah, you can go to the primary source. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And finding these primary sources, and even then, like, just asking what sheikhs thought of these, what the fatwas are around these hadith and the tafasirs of these verses, that's what really gave me confidence that I do not believe this stuff. And that's when I really attained that sense of peace in my beliefs. But that's just summarizing the story.
Of course, yeah. I mean, in the end, when I finally told my parents, "Oh, I don't believe anymore," I'd kind of sneak in the conversation, the topic of, this doesn't make sense about Islam, or why would we have this attitude towards women, whatever the subject happened to be. And my parents seemed to be on the same page as me. And when we finally had the discussion over, I don't know how long, several months probably, of, that I'm no longer Muslim, they told me that they respected how I felt and they understood. My dad started talking about Islam in a very critical way. My mom not so much, but in a way in which she understood why people believe and the importance of having those kinds of ideas. But they told me that just for my benefit, in terms of not wanting their children to, be raised atheist or whatever, and then be in a Muslim country and what kind of issues that would come up, maybe we wouldn't want to take that Islamic education class that I mentioned earlier. They figured it would just be easier. And there was something my mom said that was also revealing, that of just the whole attitude of why maybe a lot of people teach their children religion, whether it's Islam or something else. She told me that she felt that I was too young at the time to understand or accept that there might not be ultimate justice in the world. Like, that would be almost too overwhelming. And I got it, because when I did leave, it really did feel like a blanket had been torn away, Like, the foundation of your life is gone, where there's nothing guiding me in life. I mean, I'm open to there being something, maybe, but until I'll have to reserve belief on that until I actually see some, evidence of it. So at that moment in my life, I felt there's no foundation. If something bad happens to me, if I get run over by a car, that's it. That's life. And if I don't get any success in life, or if I die alone, then that's also it. And it felt crushing. I felt like this insignificant speck in this big, great, wide universe. But I also had a realization that even though those feelings were so uncomfortable and upsetting, and I think they are for a lot of people, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of people are religious, if this is the truth, then I'd rather live my life living with the truth than have this kind of wishful thinking fantasy of what the meaning of existence is and everything behind it. And I suppose that's the attitude I carried from then on. And before I just turn over to you again, I think that what I found so compelling too was that I didn't grow up in a very strict fundamentalist family. I didn't have militant devout parents, and yet because my parents decided to let me be taught religion in school, which I think a lot of parents would think, oh, that's a good thing because you get taught good values and all that. It actually gave me a lot of anxiety and a lot of suffering, like psychological suffering, in terms of being terrified of going to hell, or being terrified of, Judgment Day. Do you remember being taught the Judgment Day when you were a kid?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's like a horror. It's like a horror story, except it's real and it's going to happen. I don't even know if this is correct or not, but one of the details that has always stuck with me is my Islamic education teacher, Ustaz Muhammad, if you're watching, who's actually very influential on me for my entire childhood. He said something along the lines of the Dajjal, I guess the Antichrist, would rise, but he would be disguised, and people would think he's actually Jesus coming back, Isa coming back. And all of his followers who are tricked by him, deceived by him, would go to hell with him. And that terrified me. I was like, what if I'm tricked as well? Like, I just want to believe the right thing. And it just felt so terrifying. And so even though I lost that comfort, it was so relieving to lose the baggage of the guilt and the fear that came with Islam for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like, I mean, for you, what did it feel like now that you're an ex-Muslim now, you don't believe? What was it like?
Well, before I get to that, I just want to comment on how interesting it is that, like, we had very different upbringings, and we more or less arrived at a similar position. I believe. I guess we'll come to find out.
Oh, I'm a Scientologist now, by the way.
That's a curveball. I did not expect that. No, I know you're joking. Are you?
I am. I am.
You're joking, not a Scientologist.
Yeah.
Okay.
I might become one later. I don't know. I can't predict the future.
All right.
But yeah, please,
I like
please.
that. Yeah, and I just wanted to say it's interesting that even though they had different approaches, like, it's amazing to me that your parents chose to just let you have the faith and even argued for it for a bit, if I'm understanding correctly.
In a way,
because
yes.
It's easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's easier for you growing up where you did, and it's easier for you to deal with reality. But like you said, it may not necessarily be easier to deal with reality that way, depending on how a person thinks. What you said about Dajjal, before I get into how I felt about hell and all that, the Dajjal story was interesting because it did not make sense to me. Because, okay, we've been warned, like I've asked this, okay, we've been warned about someone trying to pretend to be a prophet. So that should just mean that anyone that I meet who pretends to be a prophet,
I know, right?
I will, like, how can I fall for it knowing that it's coming? And I'm told that, you see, that's why the people who fall for it are willfully ignorant, and they deserve to go to hell.
But who made them ignorant? Why are they ignorant? I don't know.
Exactly. Like, are they stupid? Like, are they below average IQ? Is that why they would fall for that? Or do they not know? And if they don't know, is that their fault because they missed the khutbah about it? Like, it's just, it made no sense to me that something, like, people could be led to hell that way, and then it's their fault because of a trick. You know, like, the whole shaitan concept is a trick that God let an invisible entity with superpowers sort of control
who can
us,
whisper in our minds, in our brains.
Like, it has mind control to some extent, but you're supposed to work against that with, Muslim magic, basically, by reading verses and whatnot.
With eternal damnation at stake. Eternal damnation.
Exactly. It's not about getting, like, good points and which level of heaven you're in. It's about, are you going to hell forever? And it's just, it made no sense to me that God would set these traps
and He loves you
us again.
He loves
and
you.
He loves us at the same time. This is all some kind of, like, the most messed up Sims game ever.
Oh my!
Oh,
I've tortured my Sims in quite a few games. Yeah, exactly.
You'd make a great god.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, when we talk about this, we're not talking about the actual creator of the universe, like me opposing what he decided. Again, why do I say he? What it decided. Um, this is me talking about an idea of the creator of the universe, the description of it, and it does not make sense to me. But if we were actually talking about the proven present creator of the universe, like I'd bite my tongue because, I know how powerful he is and he would mess me up for thinking that way for
I
some
know.
reason. Anyway, but after all that, I was thinking about how, like, you're talking about the fear of hell. Um, I think I don't know if I can make this blanket statement, but any reasonable, rational person who really thinks about things would have to be terrified of hell or existence in general,
How could you not?
right? Exactly. It's like, if I know how much is at stake, I would dedicate every second of my life making sure that I don't end up in eternal hell.
Well, because so much of
Um,
life is gray, and like it is gray, it's not black and white. Like, what if you make the wrong decision? Like, what if
yep.
you make something that seems like a good decision but leads to World War III? Are you on the hook for that?
Yep. No, I'd give you an even simpler example that when I first went to university, um, I was going into the building where I lived, and there was this guy carrying a case of beer. And I opened the door for him because I'm just trying to be nice. Um, and he went in, and then I thought about it for a bit, and I was like, did I just aid him in sinning? He was carrying a
You
case of
totally did.
beer.
You totally did.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's like it even again. I was a good kid, or so. Like I thought, I was trying to always be good morally, not just for God. But I remember I actually asked my parents about that situation. I said, should I have not opened the door for him? Did I help him? And they said, yeah, if you can help it, just don't touch that door. Like, and again, now you got to think about every single thing, every single decision. Am I bringing the scales, tipping them closer to me going to hell forever? Like, even if someone who didn't hurt other people, especially not intentionally, it took up a lot of space in my mind, even though I was a good believer, like, or I tried to be. So, like, I've had a lot of these thoughts, even as a Muslim, like, let alone as someone who's doubting Islam or on my way out of it. And even after I realized I don't believe anymore. Um, so yeah, it is a long, long process, and it takes time to get over that indoctrination and that fear. But I don't have like the slightest bit of it anymore. Like, my only issues with religion these days are how other people perceive those who left religion, or friction with people who do still believe, um, with their acceptance of this idea that good people can disbelieve and can critique Islam. Um, yeah, but thankfully that fear of hell is subsides. Like,
That's
if you
good.
go through the right avenues, it does subside.
Because, I mean, it really does, when you're a believer, it does feel like this real place. Like it feels as real as, I don't know, you've never been to Australia, but you know it's real. And
Yeah.
maybe you have, I don't know. But so the question that I often would get on social media and in the few times, basically I kept that I wasn't Muslim anymore like a secret from, people outside just the immediate family. But a few times where I would let it slip, or I just say it, the question I would always get, and the one I want to ask you is, so what do you believe in now? Like, do you think
Hmm.
that there's no meaning to life, and that once you die, you're gone? That's
Um,
not very nice, is it?
well, that's the thing. It does give you comfort knowing that you mentioned eternal justice or universal justice, something like that.
Perfect
Um,
justice. That's what God
Perfect
offers.
justice. Yeah. It's nice. The idea, just because it's nice though, doesn't mean that it's true. Like, the idea that someone, for example, if you're running a business, the idea that if you fail, someone's going to bail you out is comforting. And it may lead you to run your business better or take, I don't know,
Or be more
bigger risks that,
complacent. I don't know.
or yeah, that's another thing. It would let you be more complacent. Like, you keep losing money, say, at the end of the day, and instead of figuring out why, you're just like, I know my method's going to work. Whatever happens, I'm going to be bailed out.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of how I see justice today. Because if you let injustice happen, thinking that God is able to stop them, or will, or they're going to get bad karma in a certain sense, then you're complacent. You're not doing anything about it yourself, and you've kind of, like, you've transferred that anxiety away from you without actually dealing with it. of course, it means that now you have to have more on your plate every day when you think about how there is no, or there might not be some universal justice. But if you really think about justice the way that it's posed in Islam, it's not really justice, is it? Like the idea that someone will be tortured to make up for their sins, who is the torture benefiting exactly? Like, how is it undoing the injustice? So thinking about that a lot is going to get you out of that mindset that there is no justice anymore. I see it as a more hopeful point of view, as that I am aware that there is no universal justice, so I can now do more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I see what you mean, because you know, in a way, that's how a religion like Islam actually takes away agency from us. And for as much as people say, you know, these religions are life affirming, if you follow the logic of it, if there is a paradise, then it's actually good for me, if I'm Muslim and I'm a believer, to drop dead right now. Why am I messing around with this whole, you know, temporary dunya business? Let me just go up there. And in that kind of way, it's actually so negative. It's so negative, because everything we do here, if we're a believer, is just loses its significance. Even your family members. Like, I mean, the story of Ibrahim, and I can't remember his son's name now. The one he was going to kill.
Yeah. I spoke about that as one of my first things on social media.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not.
Well, it's like one where you can obviously see the issues with it, because for me the implication, I thought it was, when I was a believer, I thought the implication was that God, trust in God, and even bad things are actually for a greater good. But there's an implication to it. The implication, I think, is that God is telling Ibrahim that your son is not as important. Nothing in this life, the people you love, the ones you care about the most, aren't as important as me. I think that's the nefarious little lesson that comes with it, and that has like terrifying implications. And I can't think of how many times there's been people who, I don't know, they just don't try doing something in life because they're like, oh well, this life is, you know, ephemeral, temporary. And I just to maybe kind of explain why I wanted to do this social media stuff is, I think it's just one of the biggest tragedies that so many people live life viewing it from this lens. And even though I was no longer a believer, so I don't follow any religions now, I don't subscribe to any religions, I'm a complete atheist. I'm open to maybe there being some sort of creator or some sort of, you know, transcendent meaning to life. So I guess some people would call me an agnostic. But I haven't.
It's funny that you put it that way, because when people ask me, just to put it in a nutshell, like, well, what do you believe now, or what's your label, kind of. I don't know if when I use the word atheist, they always jump to, then how did we come to be? Then what do you think is the cause? The way I understand atheist, or at least to me, I don't believe in a God the way that they're described. Like, I don't believe in a God that...
You don't believe in this God proposition. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least I can confidently say I don't believe in Yahweh or Jesus or Allah the way that they're presented in the religions that I know of so far. And if there is a true description out there, it is God's job, kind of. It's His duty to deliver it to us if it means heaven or hell. So I'm concerning myself with the big ones, and none of these make sense to me as the creator. Is there a first cause or a creator or a God? I do not know. And I do not need to answer that, because all I need to answer is this the truth? And to me, that is no. And I think objectively it is no, but I don't care to disprove it objectively, because that you cannot disprove the unseen, unknown kind of description.
It's an unfalsifiable proposition.
Exactly.
Which is useless.
It would be a waste of time, in my opinion. Like, there are people who really like to get to the philosophy of that, and is there a God and stuff. I do not concern myself with that. All I concern myself with is, if that God exists, does it want something from me particularly? And so far, the answer seems no, because what is described as it wants from me is nonsensical. And anyway, that's just the way that I see it right now.
Yeah. Or just you could say, I mean, if it seems apparently man-made, because
very obvious.
It's hard to say. I mean, in terms of where the Quran came from, people would say, well, it's a miracle. Like it's a miracle in composition. It's a miracle in poetry. And the thing, you've definitely heard this, the whole challenge of I dare you to write one ayah like the one in the Quran. One is beautiful and majestic and full of meaning. And once I left, those kinds of things came back to me because I was thinking, well, how would you even assess that? Like, how would you even, like, what standard are you using to determine if something was not man-made? And if you did somehow manage to determine it cannot be man-made, that doesn't mean that the default other position is it is from Allah, who is the true creator of the universe. What if it's another creator?
Different angle. Yeah. There's a lot of jumps there, but I'll offer you a different angle that I hope I didn't just forget. It's okay. Is there a Muslim on earth, a sheikh, an imam, whatever religious authority that will give you, if you give them that verse, that magical verse, they would say, "Yeah, you are right. This does not. This sounds divine. You made this up, but it sounds divine." Is there one that is willing to admit that ever? I don't think so. So who is judging this? Yeah, like it's just nonsensical, and they say that's because it is the truth. But you're just reaffirming, like, your own belief at this point. There is never going to be a sheikh that says this actually sounds like this passes the test. So why are we trying to appease it?
No, it makes no sense. I bet you could, if you found a sheikh who doesn't have the whole Quran memorized or just pretends like he has the whole Quran memorized, which I'm sure exists. That's just speculation.
Go ahead.
No. I was just going to quickly say that if you just pulled some ayah from somewhere and said, okay, this is the one I wrote, would they be able, what if they said, no, this is man-made, I can tell with this and this, and then you say, well, it's from Surah Al-Nisa or whatever. Yeah. And they're like, oh, no.
Well, that has happened, not with shuyukh, but like with everyday Muslims who do speak and don't speak Arabic. There have been experiments like these, and they obviously don't know. Like there was Sheikh Al-Arifi, I don't know if you know of him. Like he's very big in the Middle East. He had this French teenager, I think, I don't know if he's a teenager or a kid or older. He doesn't speak Arabic, and he had him on a stage, and he gave him two verses. One of them is real and one of them is made up, which I found amazing on its own, because how would Sheikh Al-Arifi make up Quran? That is blasphemy. Like, how are you allowed to recite fake Quran? But anyway, he did that to get to ask him which one sounds magical, which one sounds divine. Like, you don't know Arabic, but you'd be able to tell them apart, right? Yeah. And he chose the wrong one. And they repeated it one more time, and he chose the wrong one again. And that was just like hilarious to me, that nobody can tell. A lot of the stuff in the Quran, if you really read it, and without all the expert opinions who conveniently happen to mostly be Muslim, there's not that much, like, there's a lot of things in it that aren't that miraculous at all. If anything, they sound lazy. Like, there are verses where God rhymes something with something just because it's convenient to rhyme it, not because it makes sense in the context. And again, I say God, but I mean like the author of the Quran. Yeah. Whoever and however many that may be. But yeah, it never, like, the Quran being the miracle that proves God does not hold water. And it should, like, if that's the last thing that God's going to give us, the last miracle, there should be no disagreement on that point. But that point is just, like, there are reasonable people who disagree on it, which doesn't seem like God would leave us a point we can disagree on honestly. That is kind of at the core of my disbelief, if you haven't picked that up already.
For sure. No, I feel exactly the same way, because a lot of these proofs, whatever, I mean, we're not going to go through a whole list of them here, but, whether it's, if you're looking at the Quran specifically, but, scientific miracles or prophecies, let's not get into that. Or I don't know, just the fitrah that you mentioned. Of course, it's Allah. It's the one that is most compatible with reality. I hear that all the time from Muslims. It ends up being this case where I think that people, To explain maybe why you had such difficulty with trying to find someone who can give you good guidance on how to address your doubts, it's because the belief is assumed. You believe it is the truth. So anything else is secondary. So the proofs are just kind of tacked on. Because I think for most case with a lot of Muslims is they believe, and whatever you throw at them, they still want to believe. And so the proofs that they give to others are really, I don't know, like it's hard to say. It's just to comfort themselves maybe, or just to prove to others that they're wrong. It definitely doesn't come from a place where they want to actually get to the truth.
That is a perfect way of putting it. It's not to find the truth. It's just to reaffirm the belief. So, for example, when they give you examples of, I don't know, numeric miracles, those ones especially, they get to me. When they say, if you, I don't know, look at the number 19, if you add up this number with that number, they sound like conspiracy theorists, right? Like it sounds insane to an outsider. I don't think that converts who join Islam or Muslims themselves, when they grow up, they see that numerical miracle and they think, I now believe in Allah. That is not the progression that it happens in. It is, I believe in Allah. And look at this awesome little factoid that, you know, if you look at it this way, makes sense that it's, you know, it's just trying to convince themselves and others. But that is not evidence that the creator of the universe would leave, right? He wouldn't expect you to add some numbers together and arrive at a different number and believe that this means it's from Allah specifically, not just the divine good author, you know? But yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Yeah. So here's the other question Muslims will probably want to think, like, why, like, what keeps you going in life? Why haven't you just sunk into nihilism? Why don't you just, you know, go stealing and killing and all that? What would you say, this is a very personal question, I suppose, but what would you say is the thing that gives your life meaning? Like, what is your life guide, I guess? Like, what makes you care about things?
That is a very good question. The answer is not straightforward. So it started with, like, I've had reasons not to care about life. So it makes it even more important for me to find a purpose in life. So I was already starting at a disadvantage, and losing my faith just made it look very bleak, and nihilism seemed like, you know, it made a lot of sense. But I found myself gravitating towards, well, there were certain forums where I was looking for answers about Islam, and my questions were dealt with as like, okay, you're really trying to, you know, push our buttons here. Why are you asking these questions? When I was sincerely, like, I was following up on questions, and that is not something that, you know, Muslims like to deal with. Because when you don't accept the first answer or the second answer, then it seems like you're being arrogant and, you know, you're just trying to corner them or something. But I was sincerely trying to find my faith. So then I found myself in other communities where I realized that the fact that people actually have these doubts and they find answers that are a lot simpler and a lot more, you know, sensible, like, because it's not from God, you know. And I started to find a lot of comfort in talking to people who have gone through experiences similar to mine, in terms of, you know, their thought process, in terms of their beliefs. And then I realized that I am also able to help people, because I knew by that point from my research, I'm no scholar, but I knew about the topics that I had doubts about. I knew enough about them to, you know, tell people my findings, at least to save them a little bit of time and tell them to keep looking. And I found a lot of, you know, fulfillment in helping others who were more confused than I was, who were, I don't know, feeling more isolated, more alone because of this whole shift in belief. And that gave me a bit more of a purpose in life. And then focusing on the rest of my life and, you know, trying to do the best for myself and people around me, and trying to minimize the harm in this world. That's what I think the purpose of life is to me. Because like we talked about earlier, there might not be any justice universally, so try to affect the circle around you as if like this is the end, as if this is justice. And then I found myself, you know, getting into this talking to other people, other ex-Muslims, and that sort of dragged me here in another series of events. So yeah, that is kind of what gives me purpose, helping other people and also enjoying life myself. And that doesn't necessarily mean sinning the way that Muslims see it, but a lot of the things that they would find immoral or sins are just, you know, regular things. But, yeah.
Oh, all the bacon you must have had and that you were just dying to eat.
Dude, okay, unironically, I love bacon now, but that just happened to be a coincidence.
All right.
Like, I made a sarcastic video on TikTok. Well, I was pretending to be sincere at first. I don't do this often, but it was a joke, a very obvious joke. I was pretending to be sincere, saying, "This is why I left Islam." And then suddenly I'm like, "It's for the bacon, guys. Like, the bacon is incredible." And then at the end of it, I pretended that like someone just taught me that you can have whatever you want in Jannah. And the point of that is to drive home that if I truly just wanted a food, I could have waited. Right. So all these ideas that we leave for the sin, we know we could have waited till Jannah and, you know, sin as much as we want there, or do it, but it's not a sin there.
Which brings up a whole bunch of other questions. But yeah, like for me, I think I view life and the purpose I want for myself in it to be very similar. I felt that I was born healthy. I was born with a sound mind. I was born with, you know, the opportunity to do many things, like go to university and learn and read and explore, but many people don't. And I felt that I had some sort of responsibility, not because it was a gift to me, but because I had the power to help others or make a positive difference in the world that maybe others didn't. And it felt wasteful to just kind of be selfish and narcissistic and just care about myself. And even though I wasn't Muslim anymore, I still cared about my family. I still cared about others. I still wanted to do the right thing. I still wanted to, you know, find success in society. I still wanted to find happiness. And the flip in my perspective was that instead of waiting for something good to happen after I was dead, if this life was the only thing I had, then I wanted to make the most out of it. And making the most out of it doesn't mean just, you know, stealing all the money and raping and pillaging and all that, but to make the most positive impact in a way that I understood and felt was right, which this is something that Muslims will criticize, is informed by our subjective view as humans and our subjective society. That doesn't mean it's arbitrary. There's reasons for it. Some of the reasons are bad. Some of the reasons are good. Some of the reasons have been changed or replaced. Like slavery, for example, is now pretty much illegal. Not everywhere, unfortunately, but it used to be a basic part of society. But we learned and grew and understood. And so is the case with a lot of the things that we value today. And I felt the same way with you, with other ex-Muslims, where I just knew. I mean, I didn't really know any personally who were in a position where they were suffering, but I knew they must exist. And I'd read articles and I'd see documentaries, and I knew that I didn't have the problem of being unable to, you know, just post things online or to just share my own thoughts. And I thought, if I could do that for others who literally cannot, or maybe for others who are too scared to because they have their own doubts or because they think they're wrong or God is watching them, that me doing it as someone who also is Arab, because you can try calling me Islamophobic or racist, I guess. Good luck though, because I grew up in this culture is mine. And when I attack Islam, I'm attacking its ideas and how it impacts people. I'm not attacking the Muslims themselves, which is, I think, a distinction a lot of Muslims don't appreciate. And I felt like I have to do something. And we talked about this before we started recording or streaming, that I'm not a social media person. I actually wrote a book about this, like my whole experiences. I guess it's like a memoir. But I realized that people nowadays, first of all, it's hard to get a book about the subject published in Canada. It's a very anti-Islamophobia or anything that resembles criticism of Islam environment in Canada. I thought people are so on social media, so this is where I'm going to reach people. And so that's why I started doing the Leaving Islam account, I think I started 2 years ago, actually. So this is like the 2 year anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. And so it really is for me, for Muslims who I constantly get this question. You probably get it too. I don't know what your response is to them, but for me, my response to Muslims are, why do you do this? Why don't you just move on with your life? Like, get over it. Like, just leave. I can't. I can't, because I can't just forget about all the psychological suffering. And I'm lucky it wasn't worse, because it's worse for a lot of people. I can't forget all that suffering that I know what happened to me, and I know is happening all around the world, and just think, oh well, I'm not Muslim anymore. It's not my concern. And I can't forget that I truly believe that a lot of people, Muslims included, would be better off if they didn't have Islam in their life. It's not an overnight thing. Obviously, I'm not advocating that people just drop it and just do whatever they want. It's a journey, a personal journey for everyone. And so I don't spend all my time doing this stuff. Like, I've moved on with my life in many ways, but I still feel a responsibility towards the ex-Muslim community, and that's why I do this. What about you?
I could talk about that for a long, long time. So
Sure.
I'll try to make it concise. I think one of the things that made me leave Islam, and again, it wasn't really a choice for me to leave Islam. It was just, it made me unconvinced and unable to believe, is empathy. And it seemed like God himself was lacking empathy, let alone a lot of Muslims who are good people otherwise, but they seem to lack empathy for these classes of people who are deemed bad or deemed sinful or whatever. And that led me out of belief. And ironically, it is what's keeping me, to some extent, still like keeping it in my life in a certain way. Aside from the fact that, you know, just because I left Islam doesn't mean that Islam has left the world or me. It does not cease to exist when your belief ceases to exist. Like, people ask me that with like, they're very short-sighted when they ask me things like, of course, they're not asking to know the answer. They're usually saying it as like a cloaked critique.
Of course,
But
yeah.
they say something like, if you don't believe in hell, why are you upset about the fact that you're going to hell? Well, here's the thing. Like, I have zero fear of going to hell. I just don't like that your book openly calls for a bunch of people going to hell, because it results in real life, you're going to treat those people differently. You're going to have certain views that are harmful to yourself and those people. And I don't like the fact that it is accepted because it is allegedly divine. The fact that we give it some kind of like leeway to not be critiqued or not pointed out as hate speech in a lot of ways. So that is one reason I keep talking about this, is because it is not done often enough because of people not having the privilege of being able to talk about it. There are a lot of people in worse situations than I, with a lot more tragic stories than mine. Like, mine, by all scales, was not that bad, though I shouldn't be discounting, you know, my experiences just because they're not the worst. But I do it for the other people who can't. Like, even before I started this this account and this persona online presence, I had received tons of messages from Muslims and ex-Muslims, like even doubting Muslims as well, in this ex-Muslim forum, that were either thanking me or relating to me, and it just felt like I was morally obligated to do it because I was already out in a way. I've already done all the thinking. I've already found what works and what doesn't work for a lot of people to help them out of that situation. And I felt like I had to do it for those who can't. And I still feel that way today. And I feel like a bigger moral obligation to even Muslims themselves. Like, I don't necessarily want everyone to abandon their religion, but I want to point out the harmful beliefs that could harm them as well, not just people outside of Islam. Like, just a very simple example is how one believing that doubt itself is the whispers of the devil is a psychologically harmful idea to many people. Like, there are a lot of people who would have nightmares about that, thinking that they are deficient for their rational thoughts. And I just want to reach out to them and say, you know, you're not alone. you're not crazy for thinking that way. In fact, in a lot of ways, your mind is very healthy for thinking that way. Um, so yeah, that is kind of what drives me these days. And like you said, we have a life outside of this. I've been trying to incorporate more of my day-to-day personality without revealing too much information about myself, because, you know, that is dangerous for a lot of people. But what's funny is that I get critiqued for talking about something aside from Islam. I get asked, are you now running away from questions about Islam because you don't know the answer? But I'm trying to demonstrate, like, that's part of a podcast that I'm hoping to start, or at least a segment of it, called something along the lines of heart and soul, or like humanizing Muslims, or humanizing people in general, where I interview people and just talk about everything outside of our faith, or at least like not whether Islam is true or not, or right or wrong, how we live with it, outside of it, how we are as people. I think that could help Muslims understand us a little bit more, and that is part of why I'm doing this now.
And it's really great because, I mean, I think of all the people who've done this before both of us. Whether it's someone like Abdullah Samir, who I think you've been on his YouTube channel,
Yeah.
or whoever it happens to be, Ayan Hirsi Ali, who's a famous one. It's just, it shows, like, one of the reasons why I came out and started doing this stuff, even if I was posting, you know, just text, not showing my face or revealing my real name. Alim is not my real name. I changed my name for security reasons as well. It just encourages us to put our voice out there, because who knows how many there are who feel the same way. And maybe, I mean, not maybe, definitely, the Muslims who are so critical of ex-Muslims, there might be one in their family and they just don't know it. It might even be your spouse. It might be your kids. And I think one of the biggest tragedies of what Islam does is it tears families apart simply for this issue of belief. Like I alluded with the Ibrahim story from earlier. Think of all the parents who will never truly know their kids because Islam, because they value Islam more than the relationship with their kids being based on truth and honesty. And I'm not saying this just to criticize those people, those parents or whoever. It's almost not their fault, because when you're raised in this culture and when all you have as a perspective or lens to view life is Islam, then of course you're going to react this way. You're going to be terrified for your kids. Not even from them going to hell, but from them getting I don't know, attacked by others physically, verbally, whatever, not being able to start a family. So I get it, but
Yeah,
it's
part of getting their side of, like, the story is also important, and I want to talk more about that it's not necessarily that they're the way they are because they're bad people. Like you said, something like it's almost not their fault. I think that's kind of where I stand too. Not to take away their agency to make decisions, but I get why they're influenced to think the way they do.
So it's just a question really for me of putting that perspective out there and making it valid and accepted. Because if you do that, then Muslims who do encounter these ideas, they won't be thinking, oh, well, they're clearly Zionist agents or Zionist trolls, or they secretly are Christians, or they just want to have sex all the time, or they're just dumb and ignorant. And they'll see that there's actually a lot of... Neither of us came to this on a whim. Neither of us are doing this to make a career, to make a living. There's much easier ways to do that. I could be like a fitness influencer on TikTok if well, I don't have the body for it.
I can work at a restaurant, at a fast food restaurant, and I'll make more money than this.
The amount of time,
money,
yeah,
at all.
just the sheer amount of time we've probably spent just replying to people's comments and all that.
Like, I've already sunk in more money into this than I would ever make out of it. Just like buying the equipment to be able to make the most basic videos.
There you go.
It's nothing like that. No. And I wish they would at least, like, when they hear us say this stuff, their default is to dismiss us. Like, dismiss the fact that we're telling the truth. But yeah, I wish we can get to that point at some point.
Yeah, I hope so. So the thing I wanted to ask you about, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big social media person. So I found you on Twitter. I'm active on Twitter and Instagram and now YouTube. But your domain is also TikTok, and I know that Muslim TikTok is a very big thing. I think literally billions of views on Muslim
Mhm.
TikTok. What has it been like to kind of just express these thoughts and messages that we have on that platform?
Boy, boy, it's been a wild ride, and it's not all good. Um, so first, let me talk a little bit about how I got here, why I have an online presence at all. Um, I just not too long ago, I was in participating in that forum for ex-Muslims, and it was just a space for ex-Muslims. It was not a hate space. There was a lot of moderation about, making sure that those who are trying to incite divide or trying to go there to say something racist or
Hmm.
clearly bigoted and hateful are shut down. But nobody pays anybody to take care of these spaces. So we had moderators, but they weren't enough. Like, because again, we have real lives. We don't sit there and just do this all day. So there were times where nobody was, by their computer to moderate these spaces. And I was an avid participant in one of these spaces. And at some point, there were a lot of trolls all the time, but there was a lot of trolls who were sending very dangerous, hateful, graphic images and other posts about a particular ex-Muslim content creator, if you may call her that, Infidel Noodle. At that point, I did not have TikTok. She was most active on TikTok. I did not have TikTok. I thought it was a huge waste of time in general. And I didn't even know who she was. But I saw the graphic images of like people trying to dox her, posting very violent things. And I tried to become a moderator in that space just so I can quickly remove these things before, like if it's an actual doxing intent, before anyone gets the information and so on. And because of that, one time there was an image that stayed on for a bit longer than it should have. Um, that's what gave me the motivation. And then I became a moderator, one of the moderators of that space. And then someone not too long after tried to dox Abdullah Samir with some certain information that seemed credible. Like that's what concerned me. So I immediately took it down and I reached out to Abdullah Samir on his like public email. I didn't know him at the time. I had seen his videos and like I had watched his videos for a long time. But then I sent him a message saying, "Hey, this information was leaked. I hope it's not actually yours, but if it is, just keep an eye out." Um, he mentioned how thankfully it wasn't true, and then I asked him, "Look, I've been doing this for a while, trying to help people, and it's been working. Can I share my story on your channel?" And he said, "Of course." And that's how I got that interview with him. And it was really relieving to talk about this with my voice, though I didn't have my face on there at all. And I just came up with this name on the spot, Aladdin, Aladdin. It was kind of ironic because Aladdin in Arabic means one who like praises or raises religion, which is not what I'm doing. And I remember him asking me, "Do you want to plug your socials at all? Like, do you want to promote anything?" And I said, "I don't have any socials. I just have one account that I use to moderate that space, and I don't want to like send negative attention to that space at all. So no." But then the moment we hung up, I was like, "Wait, like why don't I speak about this more? I'll take a little bit more risk." And that's how I started. Like I looked at TikTok and I found that there's a lot of communication happening there. It's more Muslim dominated, and unfortunately, there's a lot of challenging things about posting to TikTok. But I found it easier to be creative there because part of my approach, like you mentioned a bunch of ex-Muslims who have been speaking about Islam. I don't always agree with everything they say, and that's a good thing. Like we all have our different opinions
We're
and
not a
approaches.
monolith. No, of course not.
No, absolutely. Just like Muslims are not a monolith, but we are even less so because we have fewer core beliefs that we share. It's about just not believing in Islam. The rest is up in the air. And there are a lot of things about certain people that I do not like being like, I don't like the way they promote certain things or some opinions of theirs. And I thought, well, instead of just being one comment, disagreeing with them, why don't I have a voice as well? Because there's not enough diversity of ex-Muslim opinions. There's just a few talking figureheads that people love to critique the whole ex-Muslim community as if those are the representatives. So I thought, okay, let's add more people to the mix. And I started with TikTok because I found it easy to make videos without a lot of editing experience that do include editing elements, and I can express my thoughts there. And I wanted to approach it from a humor angle as well, because sometimes I can make memes and jokes. Like it's easy for me, something clicks in my head, but they're not meant to be offensive per se. It's not like I don't go there to mock Muslims at all, but I do like skirt the line of blasphemy. Like I have no issue making jokes about Islam or characters in Islam, be it even Allah or Muhammad or whoever. And the point is not to get a reaction.
You haven't torn pages out of a Quran or anything like that.
No, and I don't see the need to, though there might be a situation where that is valid, to be honest. Like, again, that's not an endorsement, but if some people were trying to demonstrate how there's going to be more outrage about that than other bigger problems. But anyway, I wouldn't do that. And my jokes are to get a point across, or my sketches or whatever it may be is to get the point across in a funny way. And sometimes when you laugh about it, you think about it differently. You know,
for sure,
when you think it is funny, you know, like why am I feeling bad about laughing about it? And that's how I started TikTok, just that progression of, you know, creating a social media account and then thinking this is easy and it's kind of fun to express my opinions that way. And it starts some discussions. Yeah, and I by no means have a huge reach there at all, but there's a lot of challenges that stop me from even being able to express my opinion there.
You mentioned that you've been banned a few times. Like, is that from people complaining or reporting your account or specific videos?
Yeah, it's almost like a weekly occurrence now, if not daily. So it started off with people like, when my videos would start to pick up some views, Muslims would mass report all of them, and they would get taken down for, ironically, for sometimes hate speech, when what I'm doing is pointing out hate speech against ex-Muslims. It was like, it felt very tough that we're being bullied openly as ex-Muslims on TikTok, and I couldn't even stand up for us. Not really like an eye for an eye kind of approach at all. I couldn't even defend ex-Muslims without the same video being taken down. They sometimes, like the appeals sometimes work and I get the videos back up, but obviously it affects my reach and how like the algorithm works or whatever. And then lately it's been reporting my whole account and getting it possibly permanently banned. I don't know till I, you know, appeal it. The head scratcher here is that often I am banned from posting for weeks at a time, and I get permanently banned during those weeks when I haven't posted anything several times. So it's clear there's like coordinated silencing attempts. I've heard of like groups where they just, you know, drop a link in there and start reporting that person incessantly, the whole group. So it's really, really tough. And there's a lot of like hate and accusations in the comments all the time. But, you know, hanging in there.
Yeah, keep at it. Like the great thing about the internet is that there are multiple avenues. So even if worst case scenario, and I hope this doesn't happen, but where just TikTok is completely banned for you, there's other ways of getting the message out there. So I mean, think about what it was like in the past, or even just 30 years ago, where we'd be relegated to what, like self-publishing books, or I don't know, doing like a TV, like some kind
Speaker's
of TV
Corner, maybe.
I don't know. Yeah, I can't even do a TV show because they'd shut it down. So, so I do wish you the best there. I am looking and seeing that we're at about an hour and a half. If you want to stick around for just a couple extra minutes, there are a few people watching. I'm just gonna see and ask if they want to ask you any questions. Is that cool?
Sure. That sounds
all right.
good.
Okay. I will ask them now.
Yeah. Does anyone in the comments have anything to say?
Yeah. We shall see. But yeah, I mean, TikTok for me doesn't seem like a place where you could really go into discourse on heavy subjects or, you know, religion or whatever. But if anything, what we've seen is that it seems to be this kind of trajectory where we're going from long form documentaries to 10-minute YouTube videos and now to 30-second TikTok videos. It's like our attentions, and
flexible.
for everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's a cat video or a meme video or someone talking about deep philosophical issues. It's all there now, which I find pretty
I
fascinating.
agree with you. Instead of just like, I was turning into some kind of a boomer about it, saying, you know, back in my day we used to watch
Yeah.
longer videos.
Yeah.
But I've just accepted that this is what the new generation likes. I'm one issue at a time. I'm not trying to tackle people's attention spans here. So let me just work within that. And I found it's challenging and kind of fun sometimes, and it requires a little bit of creativity to cram an idea in less than 60 seconds. People even scroll before the 60 seconds are over, just so you're aware.
I know.
So it's to find an idea, a way to make the idea appealing, to express it in as fewest words as possible in a fun way. So yeah, that is a bit of a challenge too, but hopefully I start to also expand into YouTube where I could talk longer, because I found that my live streams on TikTok were some of the best, because I get to interact with people and they get to listen to me for more than 60 seconds without being bored. So yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. You could make the argument that maybe it's more effective to just hit people with those little doses than it would be to just throw a book at them or send them a link to an hour-and-a-half long documentary. Who knows?
I absolutely agree, because they do need to, like, they do more of the thinking than I should, because I am just telling them about this point of contention. I am telling them my point of view, and I want them to think about it. It's not about listening to me talk for an hour about it, right? I'm not trying to feed them my ideas. I just want them to be aware of the other ideas out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We do have a few questions. Confused Heathen asks, what advice would you give to ex-Muslims living in Muslim countries?
Is it up to me to answer? Or
Yeah, sure. Yeah, please do. Yeah, go ahead. You can go first.
Well, first I want to say that my challenges dealing with leaving Islam are different than everyone's. Everyone's different. So in that area, I don't want to give advice too confidently, because I'd rather the person giving advice have a lot of experience with it. Like, from my point of view, just try to look out for yourself, number one. Try to make life the easiest it could be for you. Don't worry about any overarching issues like, you know, justice. Like, how are you going to help achieve justice? That is not anyone's actual moral responsibility. Don't try to change people's minds around you, or even, and although this is hard, as much as you can, try not to express problematic views, though that is kind of denying someone, like denying your own self. That is the advice that I would give. Look out for yourself, number one, and try not to instigate anything, even if you are not the aggressor.
That is definitely the number one most important thing, to just try to be safe, because a lot of people, they've reached out and messaged me asking, how should I broach the subject with my parents or my family? And it's sad, but sometimes the best approach is to not do it, because you don't know how they'll react or what kind of repercussions you'll get. But I would say,
it really depends. Yeah.
It depends, obviously. But as a general piece of advice, especially for younger ex-Muslims, I don't think it hurts to just find a way to be financially independent, because it just gives you options. Like, if you're living with your parents or your family, it's very difficult to just, you know, avoid doing things like fasting or prayer or whatever. But if you live in your own house, in that space, you are free to be whatever you are. And I mean, it doesn't hurt to be financially independent anyway. So I would say that as a general tip.
That doesn't mean like separating from your family.
No, it's just to have the option. It's all about flexibility, because it's tough living your life when you're also, you know, dependent on others in that way, and where you don't subscribe to their religion or their culture or whatever it happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets worse even if you identify as LGBTQ. And yeah, so the other question we have here, the question was retracted.
I remember it was something about the hate, was it?
Yeah. But I mean, I guess a question that I could ask you is what, whether it's a video or a book or whatever, what tools would you recommend to ex-Muslims who've literally just left and they're, searching for, they're examining all those big life questions that we were talking about and that we explored? Do you have a go-to thing? Do you have any kind of, video that you'd say this is one, or like even a person that you'd say this person has some good ideas?
It's gonna be hard to get specific answers out of me in general, but I would say it depends on the kind of person that you are. For some people, it would just be setting it all aside and focusing on reality. Like, how is your life going? Do you need to work harder to get that promotion? Do you need to take a break? Whatever it may be, like, put that all aside if you have the luxury to, or if your mind allows you to. Everyone's different. For some people, I'd say read into philosophy. I don't have any specific books I'd like to promote yet, but read into what other people going through this turmoil, or just people who are fascinated with the idea of existence, what they thought of it. That's not to say that you have to adopt one view or another. Just mix up your own, like whatever makes most sense to you. Same thing about like listening to others who've been through these experiences, to take a little bit of tidbit of information from each of them that you think makes sense or applies to you. And very importantly, if you're the kind of person who cares to research more into Islam, actually look into it in the most primary sources you can find. Like, if you can read tafsirs, then go ahead. If you can read the scholarly works of classical scholars in Islam, then go ahead. Listen to what Muslims say about Islam and Muslim preachers, because that is the one thing that really reaffirmed my disbelief, ironically. So don't have this doubt or have this possibility that what if I'm not finding the right information? Go seeking it. And if you can't find it, that proves to you that, you've done everything you can, and it gives you some sort of confidence. I think that's what worked for me more than other things. And just, I'm sorry, I can't give a specific recommendation.
No, it's okay. I think it's pretty important to just have like a good grounded base in philosophy and just dabble in a lot of things, a lot of perspectives, explore other religions. I think if you're in school, then taking a comparative religions course, I think that's what they're called, where you just study a whole bunch of them. I think that's a pretty good idea. And yeah, the irony is that I've probably learned more and researched more about Islam after I left than I ever did before. And it's good to just understand it better, just to see it for what it is, and to be able to just, process and organize your own thoughts about it. If I did want to make one recommendation, it's tough. I would say check out the YouTube show. It's called The Atheist Experience. It's run out of Dallas, I believe, or Texas. And one of the hosts is pretty well known in atheist circles. His name is Matt Dillahunty. I'm not the hugest fan of his approach. He's, I think, far too aggressive and abrasive with a lot of people. But
That's
I think
the word that came to mind, abrasive. When you
abrasive,
mentioned him, so.
Yeah, he really is,
yeah.
and I think to the detriment of what his goals are. But
it takes all kinds, is what I believe.
Yes, I agree.
His approach works on
some people, but I do think him and the other hosts, what they basically do, it's a call-in show. Usually they get theists calling in, mostly Christians, but Muslims do also call, and they just discuss philosophical, religious issues that are very important. And I think Matt Dillahunty in particular is very good at pointing out the problems with the ways people organize arguments, and points out maybe there's issues in what underpins their beliefs. and he's a very intelligent guy. And I think there's a lot that I learned about, what is even the best way to live your life, or what are good tools to use to, navigate this world. And so I
You
would.
just reminded me of something, by the way. Like
A recommendation, a
um,
specific one? Maybe?
yeah, specific recommendation. What you're saying sounds a bit like epistemology, if I'm
Oh,
getting it
sure.
correctly.
Yeah.
And there's a channel called Street Epistemology. I don't know if you've heard of him before.
No. Is it a YouTube channel?
It is a YouTube channel, yeah. I don't know what's his name is, but he basically, at least before COVID, he would hang out on
Oh,
the
yes,
campus.
I have heard of it. Yes, I've never
Yeah.
seen a video, but I've heard of it. Yeah,
Oh, you should watch it. Like he'd
I
hang out
totally
like
will.
on a campus or something, and he would talk to people. It's more interesting, to be honest, when he speaks to educated people, like in a secular space, like on a university, because then you get to hear not just the opinion of people who you could say don't know better than just superstition, and he just lets them talk about their belief in a certain sense. He asks questions to basically the core idea is why do you believe what you believe? And it's not about arguing with them. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about letting them arrive to their answers. And often them just thinking about it, that thought process gets them to different answers. So I really recommend that you watch that channel.
but is he abrasive?
No, not at all. He's the opposite of that.
Ah,
Yeah, he tries.
Oh, well.
Like sometimes he would like ask a question too soon or something, but he's not ever like abrasive, I'd say.
okay, great. Yeah, perfect. I can leave a link to in the video description for that. So let's finish off with. We do have a couple more questions, but maybe. Do you have time for two? Maybe we can keep our answers a
Sure.
bit short. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so another question from Confused Heathen. Do you think one could have a fulfilling life in a Muslim country, or is leaving to a Western country the only best option for ex-Muslims? That's a really great question.
It really depends, but I think that thinking of the West as a savior or the only option is leaving is very dangerous, and it could harm you in the long term, because not everyone can leave to a Western country, and thinking that this would solve a lot of your problems is not a good mentality, because the grass is always greener, right? Like a case could be made for being in a Western society or a secular society and still feeling isolated because you've lost both your culture and your religion. So at least you get to keep part of your original life, if you still live in a Muslim country, which again depends on the situation, could not be the best thing. But I would focus on trying to do what's best for you within like where you live at the moment, and always having a backup plan. Like you were talking earlier, Alim was talking earlier about having like being financially independent. You should work towards that, so that maybe in the future, if you have the option of leaving, then you would weigh your options again and see if is it best for my family life, is it best for my social life, my happiness in general. But I think there's a lot of progress being done, because it is not a sustainable solution for people to have to leave their homes just to exist, as ex-Muslims. I think there are solutions and there's already progress. So I'd say, yeah, just weigh it out and focus on the attainable more than anything.
I completely agree. I really have nothing to add to your answer. I totally agree. It's not a thing to just, oh, well, everything's going to be great in the West. But it's tough to say, because I know that I couldn't live the life I'm living now if I lived like where I grew up. So it really is.
Like,
yeah, there's trade-offs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And one last question from Tuna Akinci. I'm sorry if I butchered the pronunciation. What do you guys think about Sufis like Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and the like? Do you think anything about them?
So I can't comment specifically about them, but I did dabble into Sufism, and I spoke to a couple of Sufis. Particularly, there was one who left Islam and came back to it, but he came back a Sufi. And there were a couple of converts who are Sufis. I found it to be like the easiest avenue back into Islam, because there's a lot of vagueness and mysticism, and like, you know, take the spirit of it rather than the literal meaning, or rather than, like, nothing matters except the spirit of it is how I saw it. But it did not strike me as truth either, because it leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation. And it just seems like looking for the answer that you like rather than actually interpreting the text. Like, one of the things that I was told when I said, like, I want faith, because every answer I was given by most imams, but that one in particular, was you have to have faith to understand this question, to the answer to this question. And then I asked, well, chicken or the egg, which one came first? Like, how do I get faith? You tell me. Like, if I want to introduce someone to Islam, to faith, how does that happen? And they always said, according to like Sufi ideas, tafakkur. You gotta think, and a dhikr. You gotta say God's name and like think about it a lot, and look at the environment around you. Look at the trees, the sky. All that is amazing. Like, there's a lot of wonderment and stuff like that. And it just, I'm not the kind of person who's extremely spiritual that way, so it does not do much to me, and it doesn't help me with my search of the truth. It just obfuscates things, in my opinion. But that's just my uninformed take, or like, I don't know, barely informed take on it.
Sure. I mean, I know a little bit about Sufis and their practices. There is one objection I have that comes to mind, and it's with a lot of, I would say it's even with people who are more moderate Muslims, is I feel like the Sufis in particular, they have a very abstract, difficult to define concept of God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they'll advocate, well, their God, their conception is all good. There's no evil. There's not even prescriptions to, I don't know, not eat pork or whatever. Like some might say that. I think that those kinds of Sufis, or Muslims, if you want to call them Muslims as well, enable the other more harmful kinds of Islam when they don't even really believe in the same God, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the appeal of Sufism in recent decades, is because when you take away a lot of the specifics and a lot of the claims, the truth claims, it is easier to hold on to your belief when it is more abstract and undefined, and when it is heavily reliant on your intuitions, or your interpretations of the text, or transcendent experiences, maybe helped by psychedelics or not. Ultimately, I really say, why do you need it to be connected to Sufism or to Islam or the Quran? Because there's something else you're trying to get out of it. And like you said, it seems to be a lot of obfuscation, when maybe what you're looking for could potentially exist beyond Islam completely. So maybe in that sense, it could be a stepping stone for some people to just envision life outside of Islam. I don't know. But yeah,
Well,
definitely not an expert on it.
Yeah. Before we wrap that up, I just want to say that I don't necessarily oppose it, but like you said, I don't like it being perceived as one with traditional Islam.
With Wahhabism or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, with Wahhabism, or just even like moderate Islam, because it's just a PR kind of front for the rest, in my opinion. I mean, it should not be seen that way. It should be its own thing. Because if you're a Sufi who believes all the good things without the bad, I have no issue with that, as long as your belief doesn't terrorize you personally or anyone else.
I'd say even if you don't harm others, then...
Yeah, exactly. Like if your belief doesn't cause you to harm others or even leave that potential, hey, like, you do you. Like, I'm not going to tell you that prayer doesn't work and so on, as long as that's the extent of it. But to say, like, to keep it in the same category as the rest of Islam and to pretend like it's all one thing, that is the harmful part. So yeah, if everyone was to turn to Sufism in that way, that's a fine, viable option for me. And it could be a stepping stone of spirituality to something else for those who are spiritual. And for those who aren't, as long as it doesn't condemn them to hell, though I believe Sufism still does. It really depends on who you're talking to.
For sure. It will vary from one person to person, in my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so before I let you go, anything you want to plug? Where can people find you?
Well, I would urge people to follow me on YouTube as well as my other social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. But YouTube is where I'm trying to start talking to people more. So it would really help me out if people can follow me there, because all the other platforms seem to be a bit shaky these days. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. It's Apostate Aladdin everywhere you find me on the internet.
Excellent. And I'll leave links in the description for everything.
Appreciate that.
So yeah, thank you so much again for doing this. I really enjoyed just getting to know you and talk to you.
Likewise.
I'm like I mentioned, I figured we might be kindred spirits with the weekend meme. So yeah. I'm glad to find that I was right.
Brings people together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was a pleasure. I'd love to do something with you in the future. Like maybe we could do like a thing where we just take a whole bunch of questions and talk about them, because those were some interesting questions, and I feel like both of us could talk quite a bit about a lot of different subjects. So the offer is open. The invitation is open.
Likewise. Yeah.
Okay, great.
We will be doing something in the future, I am pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure as well. Okay, well, thank you again. And to everyone who came to just listen to us, watch us, thank you so much. I'm going to be coming out with more videos very soon, more interviews like this as well. And yeah, enjoy your Sunday, everyone. And yeah, I'll be back soon. And